and another one done. So this month we read Saints and Sinners in the Cristero War by Monsignor James T. Murphy. If you don't know, the Cristero War was in the 1920s and 30s, lasted about 3 years, but it had been brewing. The anti-clerical government had been in power for a long time, and the Cristero War was a reaction from many rural Catholics at the height of this anti-clerical regime. The book quickly goes through Mexico's history, how it was discovered, how it was founded, what it was like. I find the Philippine history is quite similar to that of Mexico. Unlike what many people say, there was a great desire for the faith among the locals. An example in Mexico is that apparently the Indians would travel 2 to 3 hours just to attend Mass. And for a few centuries, Catholicism flourished. Although, of course, not without its problems. There were many priests and religious that lived double lives, who thought about the world more than they thought about their souls. And so the anti-clerical attitude didn't stem from nothing. But as we know, even from Jesus' time, that there will always be a Judas, and that doesn't make the church itself bad. So the book focuses on about 8 key people, events, but I'm only going to focus on a few of them, the ones that stood out to me. El Maestro. He was pre-Cristeros, and his real name, my goodness, I forgot his real name. Anacleto Gonzalez Flores. Sorry for my Spanish. I don't speak Spanish. I forgot to mention Rerum Novarum, Pope Leo XIII. At the time, there was a lot of slavery among the natives, and both capitalism and socialism were gaining ground. So the church stepped in. Pope Leo XIII gave this encyclical in which he says that every person has the right to own property and to earn a living wage. So essentially affirming the dignity of work and of the workers. There were a lot of things going on already in Mexico at that time, but that was one of them, the slave-like condition issue. Anyway, I just wanted to point that key thing out. Hi, it's August. It's August. Anyway, if you'd like to join me this month, we are reading Alessandro Manzoni's The Betrothed. I've been wanting to read this for a long time, and so I would love to read it with you. In the description, you will find the Telegram group where you can sign up. In the Telegram group, we like to share our favorite passages, different insights we might have, our thoughts, etc. And also once a month at the end of the month, we get together to talk about the book. So if that interests you, I would love to have you in that group. But for now, let's get back to the book review. El Maestro. So he was an attorney, super smart, devoted Catholic, and he became a Catholic activist. And his role model was Gandhi. He did not want to resort to violence. He wanted to do a quiet war. One thing that really stood out to me about his life is that at this time when the government decided that all forms of education that someone might have had, if you had gone to a university that was Catholic, or even just high school, a Catholic high school, etc., if all of your formation or education was through a Catholic institution, then all of your diplomas were nullified. It had no value. And so what he did, because he was so smart, he was really smart. Unfortunately for his wife, he was too much about his work than he was about his family, but he was able to, at the time, whilst also trying to fight against the anti-clerical government, he redid all his studies and got the state diploma for being an attorney. The Women's Brigade. There was a Women's Brigade that no one knew about until after the war. They were so good at being hidden, and I find that so interesting because, like today everybody's saying like, oh, women need space out there in the world, all the women need to be like men, we need to show that women exist, da, 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 da. But I find this super cool because there was this special women's brigade that nobody knew about, and they brought in ammunition and food. Like they would hide it in their dresses and like bring it to to the soldiers who needed it in plain sight, and no one knew that they existed until after the war. And I find that so fascinating because they were able to help in a womanly way without being seen, the unseen. And it was so essential to the war whenever they needed, like I said, ammunition or food or what have you. And many of them worked with government. I think there was one woman who was a sister of someone in the government, but they didn't know that she was also part of the women's brigade. Saint Toribio, Santo Toribio, Romo, and the catacombs, catacomb canyons. There was a man, Toribio Romo. His sister Quica called off an engagement because she was going to help assist him to bring him to school. She knew that he was going to be a priest or, a religious, and he did just that. He grew up to become a priest, and during his time were the catacomb canyons. There were a lot of places where masses were said in canyons, hidden in the canyon. Masses were celebrated at 3 o'clock in the morning in a remote canyon or somebody's orchard, and participants had to know the password to get in. Santo Toribio Romo was part of this. He was one of those priests that provided these masses to the people. And the thing that struck me about him was his death. He was actually sleeping when they found him, and just as he was waking up, they're like, "Oh, there's the priest." And he said, last words were, he says, "I am the priest, but do not kill me." And then they shot him down. When he was younger and he was walking, I believe, with his sister Quica, and he saw this hill, and he said, and he was a little boy, and he said, "I think heaven is right there, somewhere around that hill." And today there is a church there dedicated to Santo Toribio Romo. Quickly on one of the greatest sinners, Garrido. You know how in many Christian movies, whenever they have the atheist, he's always like, "I hate God. I hate him so much. He's awful." Even though he doesn't really believe in God and wouldn't really think like that. I think when I was atheist, I didn't think "I hate God," because I thought he didn't exist. But this character existed, and his name was Tomas Garrido Cannavaro. He named his sons Lucifer and Lenin. And on his ranch, he had a bull called God, a donkey called Jesus, and a pig called Pope. So he was that caricature. He was the governor of Tabasco for 15 years, but what he's notorious for are the rojinegros. I think I'm saying it right. Rojinegros, the red shirts. This is a paramilitary group dressed in red shirts or black shirts with black pants, who would come and terrorize the Catholics of Tabasco with assassination and torture. Graham Greene wrote about it in The Power and the Glory. I highly recommend that book. I really love that book. It's really fast-paced, and you just feel like you are there. And it poses a lot of questions. It reminds me of Silence by Shusaku Endo. I will link those reviews if you're interested in knowing more about those books in the description below. But yes, he was responsible for that, and it was brutal. Not only with the Rojinegros, but with under Calles, there was so many things that were done to Catholics. Awful things. Priests having their feet just scraped off, the bottom, the skin removed, and etc. There was a lot of awful things that they would do to you if they found out that you were Catholic. Other than kill you, the torture was a lot worse. And quickly, because I think most people know God's Jester, Miguel Pro. He was a priest. He was really good at disguising himself and playing the part, which enabled him to infiltrate many places. It helped him convert many people. There was one story where he went to the mines, I think it was in Belgium, and he dressed up as a miner and converted some of the miners and shared a meal with them. So he was very good at hiding in plain sight and just playing the part. One specific thing I wanted to talk about Miguel Pro was the tactic that Calles wanted to use the photos. Everybody knows, I'm pretty sure you know or have seen the photos of the martyrdom of Miguel Pro. There was an attempt of assassination. He was pinned as one of the men, even though he had nothing to do with it, and he was shot dead without a trial. And Calles wanted to take these photos and put it out in the world to show what is going to happen to all the Catholics and how powerful the government is, and going to give fear to the people. But it did the opposite effect. Even those who did not believe in the faith had the opposite reaction. They were devastated, they were shocked, they couldn't believe that this is the kind of thing that would happen at this time. There was a particular Protestant minister who actually came to Mexico to witness what was going on, and he couldn't believe the atrocities that were happening at that time. My favorite quote from this book is, "But persecution always brings out the best in people," and that is what it was. Although many of the Cristeros and many of the clergy, many of the women and men were sinners and didn't necessarily do things the right way or what they should do, because a lot of the Cristeros, there were many Cristeros, but most Catholics saw the Cristeros from afar, right? The normal Catholic who did not want war, because the Cristeros did resolve to violence and things that you shouldn't do, even though it was for a good cause, right? The ends don't justify the means. But there were many who died, who were martyred, who did not deserve their death. And the wonderful thing that came out of this bad is that Calles wanted to get rid of the Catholics and of the Catholic faith, but it actually made it so much stronger than before. There's this part, it talks a little bit about the defanatization. It's so funny when I read it, because it's exactly what's happening today. A lot of the schools, even after the agreement, agreement, a lot of the schools, even after the Arreglos agreement, that's basically how the Cristero War ended. There's a whole part with Father Burke and Dwight Morrow, and basically helped to end the war. But I think it would be better if you just read it yourself. So even after the Arreglos, the government, let Catholics live their life. They wanted the kids to still remain anti-Catholic. A lot of the times in the schools, they had teachers teach what they teach today, which is like sex education, about your body. And at one point, children would have to derobe to show each other their parts. And then there was one man who was a mayor who learned that his daughter didn't want to go to school because of that, and he held a gun to the teacher's face and said, like, if you're telling my child to get undressed, then you should be comfortable getting undressed, and I will follow suit. And of course she didn't, she just fainted. The path back to allowing Catholicism was very slow, and eventually, as a new president came in who was more lax, let Catholics live as Catholics. But it was a long time before that happened. It wasn't just overnight. Anyway, that is my review. Those are some of the few things that stood out to me. There's a lot more information in this little book. I must say though, the writing, sometimes I would get really excited and then slowly lose interest. And I think that's just the writing style. But the events in it are really, really interesting. And worth to note. It's unfortunate that many people don't know the history of the Cristeros. There is a wonderful Christian movie. I will say Christian movie, but it's actually a good movie. I saw it like 10 years ago, called The Weight and the Glory, I believe. And it is about the Cristeros during the Cristero War, so I do recommend it. It's not like most Christian movies. It's not, I hate God. I would love to know, do you know about the Cristeros? Do you have family or, great-grandparents, grandparents who were alive during the Cristero War in Mexico? Just as Father James T. Murphy said at the end of the book, the way that the Cristeros and their stories were kept alive were through families telling the stories again and again. So I'd love to know if you have any family members who were alive during the Cristero War, or if you had a family in the Cristero War. Let me know in the comments below, and I shall see you in the next one.